People pleasing isn't about being nice. It's really about feeling uncomfortable, unsafe, even about disappointing someone. Welcome to Why Do I Keep Doing That? This podcast is for smart, capable people who are tired of repeating patterns they've already outgrown. I'm Brenda Florida, certified life coach, and if you've ever walked away from a conversation, a decision, or a relationship thinking, why did I just do that again? You are in the right place. You're not stuck, you're patterned, and patterns can be interrupted. In each episode, I'm going to break down why you keep doing what you do, where it started, and how to shift it, so you can stop reacting and start leading in your own life. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we are talking about one of the most common patterns I see in people I coach and know, and in fact, I have struggled with it myself: people pleasing. So, some examples of people pleasing, in case you don't already self-identify that way, is saying yes when you really want to say no. You agree to things that later you resent. You tend to overcommit. Here's a big one. You tend to actually feel responsible for making everybody else happy and feeling guilty if you try to actually prioritize yourself. So many people pleasers tend to think their problem is boundaries. They'll book a package of sessions with me, and their intake form, they'll say they think they have problems with boundaries because, either people don't tend to listen to them or honor their boundaries, or they're just afraid to speak up, or whatever it is. They just think they need to be better at saying no. So if you have left a conversation thinking, why did I just agree to that? You know what I mean. And a lot of times it feels like, well, if I can do it, I should do it, right? Somebody asks you to do something with them or for a good cause or something. And you probably have that moment where you don't really want to do it, but you can't think of a good excuse. Like, you'd have to have a good reason to say no to that, right? And so the mind starts spinning. It's just like, well, whatever. I can do it. Then you have that feeling, whether you're conscious of it or not, that you don't want to disappoint this person or let them down, some version of that. And so you say yes. So I have a story from a client session. This was just the other week. And this client was actually asked to do something very fun. So this isn't a responsibility for something that might be drudgery. This was for fun. They had a relative that wanted them to take an extended trip with them in other parts of the world. It all sounded lovely to me when she told me. And this client loves to travel. She loves this relative and has traveled with him before and really enjoyed herself. And she had it on her own mind that she wanted to take some sort of extended time away. So when he asked, even though she knew it didn't quite feel right for her, she said yes, even though she didn't actually want to take the trip with him. She could, and he wanted her to come so bad. And so she felt that little sense of, I don't want to disappoint them. This is a very classic people pleasing situation. So, people pleasing shows up everywhere. It shows up in work, romantic relationships, family dynamics, in friendships. It causes overfunctioning and plenty of burnout. It is to be taken seriously. And once you start to really see this pattern, you realize how pervasive it is in your whole life. Okay, so remember at the beginning when I said the problem isn't saying yes? This is the pattern I meant, the pattern of people pleasing. It isn't just saying yes when you say no, it's something much deeper. And what we really need to do is learn how to actually break the pattern, which is very much like breaking a habit. Okay. But before we can break a pattern, we need to interrupt it. And usually, before we can interrupt it, it's really helpful to have a deeper understanding of that pattern. And it can also be very helpful to your inner critic so that as you work to interrupt and change this pattern, your inner critic doesn't take the reins. And yes, your inner critic is another pattern. That will be another episode here on why do I keep doing that? So, people pleasing is a pattern that we learned usually when we were very young for actually the purpose of safety, emotional, physical, whatever it was. We learn it in our families, we learn it in religion. I mean, as a little girl growing up in a very conservative, fundamental, evangelical Christian church and family, I was taught that, good girls say yes, good girls are helpful, that my job as a girl and then as a woman ultimately is to serve, how convenient, the men around me or the authorities. So I'm supposed to serve the church, serve the pastor, serve my husband, serve my parents, and it's taught that that's a really, noble, fabulous thing. Patriarchy loves